Alright, so this is the new rotor. I've just slid it onto the bolts. You want to avoid touching it, but there you go. There's the hub. Just slides right on. And this is that screw that myself, along with everybody else, was wondering about. It just goes right back in there. You want to make sure you line up your holes on your rotor when you slide it in. You've got three places where this screw can go. You just want to make sure you line it up with that threaded hole. Put the screw back in, and it takes a Torx. Well, I'm just using a Torx head. I don't know which number it is. I want to say it's like a T11 or something like that. But what I did was I took a Torx head, put it in a 1/4 inch socket, and then used an adapter so I could use my 3/4 inch drive ratchet. And it came right out. There was no, it didn't have any seizing on it at all. I did, however, go ahead and put back in some anti-seize in those threads just so that it wouldn't lock up on me in the future. But like I said, this works really nicely, just using that Torx tip. And let's see if it's okay. Here we go. It's a T30. I don't know if you can see that or not, but so you'll need a T30 Torx head to take that screw out. All right, so the rotor's back on. I've got the retaining Torx head T30 screw in. Everything is on. You know, now that I've done this in reverse, it's not a bad idea having that. If you've done brake jobs before, that's always one of the things that I always kind of wonder about, because the rotor just sits there until you put the caliper and slide everything back on. So this isn't necessarily such a bad feature. It's just nice to know. Now you can see with it all back together, it looks like that this nut is holding everything on. So it's very deceiving. If you look at that, it looks like, let me get some light in there. I mean, it looks like that thing is holding it on, but it's not. That's just your retaining nut for your axle, I guess. All right, so here's the pads that I'm using. Again, I went with the Duralast. I got all this at AutoZone. You could get it wherever you want to. And these are for the front, and they are the MKD 1075 brake pads. And you'll notice that the front and the rear pads, there's no way to confuse them because they're nowhere near the same size. The rear ones are the MKD 1093s, but they're a lot smaller proportionately in size than the front pads. So I'll go ahead and put this on. Now I went ahead and got some anti-seize for the pads when you put it on, and I just like to put a little coat where the pad goes up against the metal, just to make sure that you reduce any noise that you would have. So I always put a little bit where it makes contact, and that looks like these little pad kits here. Those little kits, they're usually at the register whenever you check out at an auto parts store. Just apply that, and we'll start putting this puppy back together. This is going to go on first. This is where the caliper is going to rest down inside this deal, and so you want to, it just bolts on the back side with these Mamma Jamma bolts that were a booger bear to get out. So I am putting some anti-seize back on that. You can see where they had seized up. I actually had to use a hammer and an open-end box-end wrench to get these suckers off. So I'm going to put some anti-seize on there to keep the threads from seizing up, so the next time that we do this job, it's not going to be such a pain. So when we get to the other side, I'll show you start to finish, and you'll be able to see this. But these things were, to this point, this was the hardest thing to remove. All right, now I'm going to put this this caliper retaining bracket back on, and according to manufacturer's standards, I went and did some research on it. You want to put that brake lubricant. It just squeezes out of that tube. I popped these brackets off. They just pop right off of the retaining deal, this cast deal, and cleaned them with some brake cleaner. And I've lubed both sides. There's a bracket here and there's a bracket there, and the bolts that hold this thing on are right here. I don't know how to put the camera where you can see it. Okay, right here, and then there's another one right there. So there and there. But one thing I wanted to mention, and this is one of the things that my dad always drove home that I picked up on, is anytime you're putting bolts into a threaded area, you want to wiggle it as you're threading it in. Now I put anti-seize on the threads of this bolt and inside the threading itself, but I've wiggled them both so that they don't cross thread as I put them on. So I'm going to finish tightening that up, and that'll have this part back on, and it looks kind of like that from the front. Okay, so the bracket's back on now. I neglected to tell you that's a 15 millimeter bolt head that comes out that holds this thing on. Another thing that I wanted to point out before I got this back on where you couldn't see it, each one of these boots in here, I put some of that brake lubricant in there as well to help with those bolts when they go back in. And this is what the bolt that goes on the bottom looks like when they go back in to hold it all in. So I thought I'd show you that. Alright, so the back one just slides straight in. The front one you got to kind of put it, the inside part in first, angle it in, and then pop it back like that. So it just slides into the grooves. I put some of that lube is on this side because when I put the caliper back on, it's going to slide down on it. This is just going to reduce some noise in the brakes whenever you're braking. So I'm getting ready now to put the caliper back on, and we'll see how it looks. Alright, there's several tools that if you've never done a brake job before, you need to go ahead and buy. And this is one of them. This is a pad spreader, but it's also used to compress the caliper cylinder back down. Some people will tell you to use a C-clamp, but I found that these things work the best, and I'll show you how to use it. Alright, so you can see the caliper cylinder, it needs to go back inside this housing here. And so the way you can do that is you just take this tool, show you how it looks, and you're going to place it right up in here, and you're going to start screwing. Probably should have went ahead and done this for you. Well, I'm going to go ahead and screw it all the way out so you can see it and not have to wait and watch me. I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm going to try it and see if it works. The tool was not long enough. The bolt wasn't long enough, and I was trying to think of what to use. You may not have the tools that I have. So I just took one of the lug nuts and put it in behind the little plate, and now we're just going to twist the knob, and as we twist the knob, you'll see that we're compressing the caliper back down inside the chamber, and that you basically have the concept now. I'm going to have both hands to do it, but you just turn this and it pushes the caliper back inside the chamber. So you can see that it's out right now, and you're just going to compress that back in. I don't think I'm going to come back and show you the completed version of that. You get the idea. Okay, I guess I am going to show you what it looks like completed because I couldn't use the lug bolt. The lug nut wouldn't work. So that socket that I thought I was going to need, that 36mm socket that I thought I needed to take off that nut that you do not take off, it happened to fit perfectly down inside there, so I just used it as my spacer to be able to compress it back down, and now as you can see, it's fully compressed back inside. Alright, I've put never seize on the threads of this pin bolt that goes back in, and I've put the brake lubricant on the long part of the shaft that goes in. This one goes down here, and that one goes on the top side. They are different. So you need to, what I've done is laid all my bottom stuff to the right and all my top stuff to the left as I'm working, so I know what's what. But anyway, now all I do is just take the caliper, flip it back around. I told you I put some brake lube in both of the boots as well, and just flip it back around, run the bolts back through it, tighten it down, and then we're on to the next side. Alright, again, remember that thing about the wiggle. Both the bolts are down here. I'll tighten both of those up, and it'll be more or less, this side will be done, unless I've forgotten about something, and if I have, we'll cover it on the other side.